Hi, Rudy. You're on mute. You got to turn off the mute button on the bottom of the picture. Well, let's start over.
Okay. Hey, welcome to I Was Just Thinking. I'm Rudy Maxa, travel journalist and broadcaster. And if you're a regular, you know that every 2 weeks, I interview somebody in this webcast on Thursday at noon Pacific, 2 o'clock Central, 3 o'clock Eastern, who has a link to travel. My guest coming up, Rob Perez, is a director, film writer, and just lately, not just a journalist, but a columnist. But here's the thing. Have you ever thought about moving somewhere, particularly if you live on the East or West coasts, and your friends go, wait, why would you ever want to live there? Who lives there anyway? It's happened to me, and I'll tell you about that in a minute. Rob wrote the movie 40 Days and 40 Nights. It was very successful. He lived in LA, he grew up in Texas, but now we find him in the wilds of northern Minnesota up by the Canadian border. We're gonna ask him why. And I'd like you to join in if you've ever told somebody you're moving somewhere, or you actually did move somewhere and your friends still can't quite understand why you're there. We'll meet Rob in just a moment. First, I haven't opened a wine in a while. I wanted to open a very inexpensive wine. I can't tell you how it's going to taste. It's a dolcetta from the Piedmont region in Italy. That's the region that is contiguous to Switzerland and France. It's encompassed on 3 sides by the Alps. And it's famous for that's the capital. Turin is the capital city, and Turin is also the capital of the car industry in Italy. But there's also a whole lot of grapes. The Dolcetta is probably the 3rd ranked grape that folks use to make wine. Probably better known is Nebbiolo and Barbera. Those 2 are better known wines. But this is a very inexpensive, should be drunk wine from the Monferrato Hills in northwestern Italy. And I want to see how it tastes here. I will tell you, I put it in the refrigerator for an hour before drinking. You just saw a picture of it. This is it. It's from Castello de Poggio, I think. Poggio. And I'm having a feeling that's pronounced that way. Correct me if I'm wrong. You will know. It's a 27 Dolcetta. And it's considered a very modest wine. You can buy it for between $15 and $19. Mine is quite old, 2017. It's meant to be drunk young, but it comes, as I said, from a very dark-skinned Dolcetto grape. So you see it's almost, I'll show it to you in just a second. It's almost black. Very pretty, but it really does look black on under this light, doesn't it? Unusual nose. I just got back from almost a month in Bordeaux, so I'm sort of used to Bordeaux noses, which are very pretty. This is a little herbaceous, but not in a Burgundy kind of way. Let me taste it. Tell you what you think, because it's a good. If it's good, it's a well-priced bottle. It's got 3.5 on Vivino and a price of 17 and change. I think I got it for 15 here. You can get it anywhere. They make a lot of it, as evidenced by the fact it's sold in Kroger and Whole Foods and other grocery stores around the country. I can't remember the last time I tasted a Dolcetto, so I don't know what to compare it to, but it's very different than any Italian red wine I've ever had. It's considered a sweet grape, but it's not a sweet wine, and it isn't sweet drinking it, but it's it could probably stand up to anything. It's probably a good day, everyday drinking wine at a very inexpensive price. You know, I've done some fairly pricey wines, and I thought I'd do something a little more accessible for all of us financially. I bought a bottle of another Dolcetta from the same region, but by a different producer. I didn't open it, but I will, and I'll compare it. So it's worth, for $17 or $15. Take a flyer on a Dolcetta sometime. This is 2017. If you can get a 2020, 2019, 2020, I think that might be the thing to do, because they should be drunk young, much like most Beaujolais. All right, let's meet our guest, Rob Perez. Can you bring him in? Producer Tommy. Hello, Rob.
Good afternoon.
So, Rob, I think you heard me set this up a bit, which is that I want to talk today about people who move unexpected places and whose friends say, "What are you doing there?" And as you know, we're good friends. I still, even though I've been in the St. Paul, Minnesota, which is far south compared to you, I've been here 22 years, and I still have friends on the East Coast and West Coast going, why are you there? I mean, I moved there for a girlfriend, but we broke up, I don't know, 12 years ago or so. Everybody's like, so why are you still there? Come back to Washington, D.C. and New York. Come back to L.A., whatever. But I don't want to talk too much about why I'm here, but I'm not unhappy being here. Let's talk about you. You started your career in Los Angeles. Is that fair to say?
Well, I was born in Texas, right? School on the East Coast, and then immediately out to Los Angeles, right? So that was 1995, I believe. And, that's where Hollywood was. That you don't get to skip that step, right? So there I went, and, you start in the trenches, but I ended up being there. I don't want to jump ahead, but I was there for a very significant period of time.
About how long, roughly?
Dozen years.
Dozen years, yeah. And I mean, you don't generally you don't just show up in generally you just don't show up in Hollywood and get a job writing a hit movie.
No, I was the coffee boy. I was the yogurt boy. You start in the trenches. You start at the bottom. I made lots of copies. I got, I know all the best writers' coffee orders. What else? But I hung around and was able to kind of learn by I was in some pretty cool environments. I was working on the Larry Sanders Show. Let's be clear, I was the coffee boy, right? Like, I'm not, but literally, right? Like, I'm a production assistant but I'm 22 years old, right? Sure. That's a perfectly excellent place to start. And the writers were, shared, they're all in there just working, just trying to make that show better, and to be on a show, to hear them kind of create week after week, and to hear structure, and then to hear then you see production and you see them okay, we have a 40-minute show. We need 22 minutes or something like that, right? So to watch the sausage being made, so to speak, if you're willing to pay attention and willing to put in the hours, you can learn.
And did you enjoy the West Coast milieu?
When I first got there, I didn't notice, my whole being was just work, right? My whole being was just about break in to Hollywood. I didn't have any uncle running a studio producer. I didn't know anybody. I didn't, so just breaking in was kind of the goal. And every social, every professional, just take every job you could and meet everybody you can. And then simultaneously in your free time, write, right? You can't just talk your way into a writing job. You've got to have a script.
Obviously you didn't have a lot of money, so you weren't hanging around the Polo Lounge.
No, I was not. That story comes later. But I was able to, get a break and sell my first thing. And hilariously to me, I was just reading about this guy. He's kind of one of my idols, but Larry David
sure, is
one of the people that killed my first projects. So the true story. So I sold the script to producer and director David Steinberg, if you know the comedian director, and developed it with those guys for a year. And producer was Michael London, and just learned a ton, and one of the first things I tell young writers is what I learned that first year, which is do not take notes literally. If you do, they will fire you. They will get someone else. What they're looking for is to understand the spirit of the note, right? If they needed someone to take notes literally, they would rewrite it themselves, right? So they don't know answers. They just can tell you. And I'm talking about two intelligent, and this is just most of my career as well.
And did you
have a question?
Yeah. Was that first script 40 Days and 40 Nights?
No, that was before that. It was a script called Instant Karma.
Okay.
About a Hollywood producer whose dad dies on his deathbed, and just right before he dies, he says, "I think I might be Jewish," and he dies. And he's like, "Well, wait, that means that." Well, hold on. And then it becomes a kind of the instant karma is like, okay, well, I got to get God, but I'm a busy man, you know, like I don't have time to like, I can't spend time in the mountain studying these scripts, right? Like just give me the log line, you know? And so he ends up churning through religion and guru and, after rabbi, you know, churning through religions and in an effort to just find a little bit of God. It's
and I'll preface the next question with the fact that many scripts are written, very, very few get made. Was that one made?
No, that was not made. Larry David. We got it.
Larry David killed that one. Okay.
We got it to a place that we all liked it. That was my first check. That was my first professional. I still remember like getting that check and like marveling at this idea that I made this up. You know, like I'm, and then I spent a lot of time writing it, but I didn't make, you know, like it was just a really like, oh, like it was the first time I realized you could get paid for this. And I was the only time I think before or since in Hollywood where I walked anywhere, and I decided to like walk from my house to the bank and deposit my check because I just wanted it to last longer. And I just knew like, I will never get a first check again for writing.
Right. And I remember when I started getting paid to write that I wasn't making any. I wasn't making cars. I wasn't making refrigerators. I wasn't making anything useful. I was writing words, and somebody was willing to pay me. It's a miraculous thing. Okay, so you're in LA.
Well, yeah, you know that, you know, the feeling that, do they know I'm making this up? Right? Like that's, in journalism, at least you're probably not my kind of journalist, but in your journal, you're probably covering an actual story. You're probably relaying facts. You're laying down information that's true. But like in my fiction writing world, I make it all up. Like I make, you know, I mean, sometimes you just steal things, but you know, that's an interesting character. I'm going to take that person and put them in this script.
Right. I did briefly write for a CBS drama show. And that was all made up, although it was based on real stories I had written. So at any rate, so you're out in Los Angeles. What brought you to Minnesota first? Had you ever considered moving to Minnesota? Did you know anything about Minnesota?
So I became friends with Josh Hartnett, the actor on 40 Days and 40 Nights. And he is from Minneapolis or St. Paul, he'll tell you. So I had heard of it. I'd stopped through on, you know, cross-country road trips. I had no strong feelings about Minneapolis or Minnesota whatsoever. When we became friends, and I don't know, a year or two after the movie, I came to visit him for a few days.
The big movie, 40 Days, 40 Nights. 40
Days and 40 Nights. After a few years after that, or, you know, after production, we were pals. I came to, he's like, come be my guest. I want you to see what I see about this town. And part of what struck me about it, before I'd even gone, he didn't live in Los Angeles. For an actor at that magnitude, not living in Los Angeles, he didn't live in New York. He lived in Minneapolis. And I'm like, well, why? Right? Like I would ask the same question that people then ask me later. And he's like, well, come and see. And I'm like, well, I got a weekend. Let's do this. And that's when I got to kind of see a very different world, right? It's not, you don't just go to, you know, the 3 tourist sites and see, it's a nice museum, right? Like you get to see what a day-to-day life is like. Like you get to see the local people. You get to see weather. I mean, it was summer then, but like
nice.
Like yeah, it was great. And so it was just very the biggest juxtaposition with Los Angeles that was pretty obvious was like how it was authentic, right? And I don't mean there aren't phonies, to use a Salingerian word here. You know, there are phonies everywhere, but should I do that too? But I could just see that these people, what I felt in Los Angeles, people, I've said this before, but people spend so much time trying to seem interesting and not enough time trying to be interesting. And in Minneapolis, I could feel like these people were just much more comfortable in their own skin. You know, like they weren't trying to impress me or anybody, right? It wasn't just me, it's just everyone. And so that kind of stuck with me. And I don't remember what year that was, but maybe 2004 or 5 or something like that. And I, after that, ended up writing a script set in Minneapolis. It took a few years I was still writing other scripts at the time. So, this one was for me to direct, but I didn't come back to it until a few years later. But when it was time to come back to it, I knew I had to make it in Minneapolis. And that's what I just put the little stuff I had in storage and packed a couple of bags and like came on out. And I was like, I'm pretty sure I can raise the money out there. I'm pretty sure I can make a movie. The hard part, just a little bit of backstory about making movies. Like I was successful as a screenwriter, but I wasn't making movies after 40 days. I had gotten close several times, and close is not the same as making a movie. And so when you have people, studio executives, agents, production, you know, like when you have people saying nice things about your scripts, you're like, oh, that's great. Like I'm reaching the world. But then you realize like, that's not why I'm a writer. That's not what I'm meant to do. I'm meant to like tell my story to more people, not just the 100, you know, producers and agents and studio execs. Like that's not my audience. My audience is out there. They're just regular people. So that's when I kind of commit myself to making my first movie, to directing my first movie after a few close calls.
Okay. Before we go to why you left the metropolis of Minneapolis, which is fairly urban, and why you went up north in the wilds, as I call them, I wanted just to tell our audience the story of this Washington Post reporter who in 2015, he's a guy named, Chris Ingram. Chris Ingram was a reporter based in Washington. He commuted every day 3 hours to and from work. He had a couple kids. And he was the guy who wrote about data. He still does, though he's not with the Post any longer. And he had noticed some government study that ranked the livability of towns in the United States based on, the land, you know, how many, if there were a lot of trees around or whatever, and all kinds of points that had nothing to do necessarily with, you know, how good the education system was, how much the houses cost. It wasn't that. It was just sort of a livability thing. And the study, in a very un-Washington kind of way, decreed that Red Lake, it's called Red Lake. Do you know it? You remember what it is?
I don't think I saw that study. Is it Minnesota?
Red Lake Falls, yeah. Red Lake Falls, yeah. It's up in your neck of the woods, and
let me see where.
So he went there to write about the worst place to live in America, and that's what he titled the story. He said it's the worst place to live in America. Small town, Red Lake Falls. But he went home after he wrote the story, and he started getting calls from people who lived there, from the local congressman, a senator apparently from Minnesota, business people saying, hey, come out and spend a little longer. Come on out. We'll take you to dinner. And he went back out and he stayed longer, and he went back to Washington and he thought about it, and he realized they were living the life he wanted to live. He hated commuting 3 hours a day, hardly ever saw his kids. Housing prices, everything in Washington is very expensive, like it is in, not as much as New York and LA, but close. And the price of a house in Minnesota was so much less that 6 months after he wrote "This is the worst place to live in America," he and his wife and kids moved there, and he sort of became the Washington Post Midwest bureau chief, at least as a pertains to data. He finds a lot of obscure studies and draws conclusions from it. He's a very fascinating writer. He has since gone on. He left the Post eventually, and he's since gone on to. He still lives there. He's since gone on to write for a blog. His wife is now a city councilwoman in the city, and I was hoping to have him on today, but
you should have him on.
Well, I wanted to have him on, and I spent 4 days trying to find him until today. I realized I could call the city council and get his wife's number, and they said, "Oh, they're on vacation." But I tried the wife's cell. I tried their home phone. No luck. I have a feeling they're up in the Boundary Waters, which is this wilderness area north above between Minnesota and Canada. No motorized boats allowed on the waters. You port your canoe from lake to lake. A gorgeous area of the world, and so I couldn't get him on. But
that's where I live.
I know that's where you live, and that's why I wanted to have you on. So I think it was COVID that prompted you to leave you and the mother of your 2 children, stepmother, one mother of your daughter, to move up north because her parents had a fairly large home there. Am I correct?
That's right. It was early March of last year, and we had just gotten back from Hawaii, and things were looking grim. And we kind of got word that a shelter in place was coming our way, and the schools were going to close anyway for spring break, and just schools didn't quite know what this was and what to do. And so we said, okay, well, and we packed for 2 weeks. We've got a place up north. It's in the woods, but there's internet, and at the very least, like, we can be outside in nature, right? It was March, so it wasn't, the frigid winter. And we packed for 2 weeks, and we haven't left.
And how long? So that's more than 2 years now. No,
your math is bad. It's about a year and a half. About a year and a half, I think.
And how long does it take to drive from Minneapolis to where you are now?
4 hours. If you have kids, 3.5. Sorry, the other way around. If you don't have kids, 3.5. But if you have restroom stops frequently, then it's longer.
Okay. So, and you went up there, it sounds like, thinking this is going to be 2-3 weeks. This is a short.
No, we literally packed for 2 weeks, expecting, okay, they'll have this under control. This is how long can a pandemic take? I hadn't really researched the 1908 pandemic or whatever. So it was like, well, we've got modern science, and whatever. We were only 4 hours away. It wasn't, across the world or anything. Right. But we just had no idea.
How long did it take for you to fall in love with the wilds? And I call it wild.
Yeah, no, I think it's the North Woods, right? Like,
you live right on Lake Superior. You look right down on Lake Superior.
Yeah, I can show you.
Houses around you. It's a forest.
Here,
a road to your house.
Let me see if you can see the view. Do you see a lake out there, or is it blown out?
Well, it's blown out, but everything that's white there is Lake Superior.
So there,
a few sunflowers.
That's lake right there, right? That's Lake Superior is it's right there. It took me, but it didn't happen overnight. It was a gradual developed affinity. It was not instant. And I think what happened for me, like, when you have we had a 1.5-year-old at the time, like, that's just kind of, and I became the teacher for our 8-year-old, because that was it went to distance learning like that. And distance learning sounds really cool. Like, you put your kid in front of a computer and you see him at 3:00. It's not what distance learning is. Not for a 6 or 7-year-old,
Right. And her mother, with your girlfriend, was owned an ad agency.
She's running a company every day and fighting for their own life. Like, a lot of ad stuff went on pause. Like, hey, we don't need to advertise if people can't. Our stores aren't even open. So that was kind of its own problem. Making sure education happened was its own problem, and was an enormous one, and one I had respect for teachers before this, but it definitely went up exponentially of what they do and how they do it, and their muscles that they are able to communicate with small people in ways that are on their level, firm, but I don't know. Teachers are great, at the risk of stating the obvious, and I can't do it, right? Like, I can't teach an 8-year-old well. I do teach college courses, and I enjoy that, and I think I'm good at that. But like, there's just certain muscles that just weren't in this house. And so it was just very, very hard for a while.
How about the outdoor life?
The love affair happened during nap time and like recess, where Rob got to take 35 minutes for himself, and he would go run out the trail. So that door is Superior, and out that door so that's Lake Superior. And then there's the Superior hiking trail out that door. And so I've never run trails before, but if you only have half an hour to yourself, you run, right? You don't walk, you like run. And so every day I just start running this trail over and over and over. And I don't quite realize it, but it's happening. It was spring, so it's March turning into April, and like every day every day it's different. It's not the same run, even though it's the same place. And the snow turns to mud, turns to dry, barren, turns to green buds. And I'm like, wait a second. And once I start kind of tuning in, it kind of opens up the world for me in a way that like, when you hear kind of the Buddhist and the Zen stuff of like, your happiness is there. You just need to see it, right? It's not somewhere else, it's here. And this kind of, I don't want to say monotonous, but sameness, right? This routine helped me see, like, I don't think I'm going to do better than this, right? Like, I think this is happiness. And if I can just pay attention to it and cherish it and revel in it, then that kind of changed. Then I'm like, well, what else am I not doing? Let's go skiing. Let's go canoeing. Let's go, let's try these nature things that nature people do. A hike is a thing that I wrote about, and it's going to sound strange, but I didn't know what a hike was, right? Like, I knew it was a walk in the woods, and then you stop walking, right? Like, but like, and then what I always thought was like, you get a prize, like there's your view. But then here I realized, like, we just walk until you stopped and walked home. And I'm like, what the hell is that about? And then I realized, like, just doing it over and over and over and over, like, that the walk is the thing, the hike is the thing. And once I started to understand nature, then this became like an ideal place to live.
Well, in case you or anyone else don't think I'm a city boy, I came to visit you there once and went hiking with leather loafers because I forgot, hiking, right. I do have sort of hiking shoes, but I forgot to bring them. That was quite a sight, hiking in those loafers. And I still take a lot of guff for that. My guest is Rob Perez. He's a writer of movies. The best known one would be 40 Days and 40 Nights, starring Josh Hartnett, playing a man whose girlfriend has broken up with him. And he's so heartbroken. He swears he's going to not date anybody for 40 days and 40 nights. And all his friends conspire to, they all bet on when he's going to break that promise. And they conspire to have their best friends seduce him or somehow lead him astray. And of course, it's a love story, as you might imagine. And he became friends with the star of the show, Josh Hartnett, who lived at the time in Minneapolis and came out here. So you mentioned in the beginning, you agreed with me that there are friends on the West Coast and East Coast probably as well, but West Coast, who probably still don't understand why you're in Minnesota, right?
No question. I even have people that are here that are like, why would you leave? Why are you go home, go back? Like, that's better, right? Like, there's that grass is greener mentality that even exists here, right? They all kind of assumed it's just inferior, right? Like, LA has better sushi. True story, right? Like, LA has better people. No. LA has lots of good people. It's a huge town, you know. But for me, like the biggest thing, one of the stories that I tell, the things that bothered me about Los Angeles, and it's about all of humanity, but it just seems to just glaring in Los Angeles. It's entitlement, right? Like you're sitting there, you're on your phone, and you're ordering your latte, and somebody's like, "Hi, sir, can I help you?" And they're like, "Hold on, double latte." Blah, 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 blah. Anyway, they don't look the person in the eye. They don't acknowledge another humanity, and they think you are less than them because you work for them, right? And I never really worked service industry, so it's not a gripe of like haves and have-nots. This is a gripe of like just acknowledging humanity. And I just saw over and over and over how Los Angeles just thought of the world as like us and thems, you know, and people, I did this all the time as kind of social experiments, but like I would introduce myself at a party as a plumber, and no one was interested. And then when you've written, you know, a successful writer, then some people are interested, you know, like you know, it was never about like, are you interesting? It's like, what can you do for me? Right. And then the juxtaposition, the other story, part of that story, in Minneapolis, one of the first weekends I'm here, I see this cool young couple at a store, and somebody's taking their bag out for them, you know, like grocery bag, a bag boy who's special needs something. And he puts it in the bag, and they just kind of look him in the eye, and they just say, "Thanks, Terry." And he's like, "Thanks." And he kind of knows their names, and he says, "Thank you." And that's it, right? It's a 4-second interaction, but that's all it took to kind of acknowledge humanity, his humanity, and lead a life that I wanted to lead, which is just more connected. You know?
Yeah. And it's the same on the East Coast. I mean, there's that famous New Yorker cover from decades ago, which I don't know if it's David Steinberg, but it looked like David Steinberg painting of the East Coast with New York and New Jersey. And then this huge swath all across the country is sort of blank. And then there's Los Angeles and maybe San Francisco. I can't remember. But everything else in the middle it's called flyover country. And I did it for years. I didn't know for decades what the Twin Cities were, that I didn't know it was St. Paul and Minneapolis. I certainly didn't know how distinctly different they were. I didn't know how many lakes there were, even though all the license plates say land of 10,000 lakes, or state of 10,000 lakes, I guess is all it says. But I didn't know that. We have a few comments here. Stephanie says, "Hey, Rob, your hairline looks great, especially compared to Rudy." Stephanie, I don't have a hairline. That's what.
Thank you, Steph.
William says, "Stop drinking on videos." William, it's 2 PM here. It's 2:30 now. I can drink occasionally on videos. And I usually use wine as a way of sort of saying, go around the world, try some different wines, go to Piedmont, try an Italian dolcetta. Anyway, Laura says, "I remember that guy." I don't know if that's you or me. And Renee says, "I got to go to Minnesota." And Michael says, "Entitlement? Ah, yes, some people."
That's funny. Pretty good, Michael.
Yeah. Have you ever discussed, I know the mother of your son, your girlfriend has done business in Los Angeles for her ad agency and really traveled a lot of places, New York as well. Have the two of you ever discussed living somewhere else?
Yes. After a few glasses of wine, like, you know, the south of France comes up a lot. You know, the pie in the sky, you know, when it's ever come up in the light of day, there's always this kind of, do you speak French? Part of the conversation. And she's like, "Well, no, there's internet." And I'm like, "Can you order groceries?" Right? Like, can you, like, no, we're not like that. I love the south of France, as does she, but the Tuscan village, do you speak Italian? No, I don't. Right? Like, so, nobody knows. I would have, if you had done this call with me 2 years ago and you said, "Well, have you ever thought about the North Shore? I would have said, no, don't be ridiculous, Rudy. I'm a city boy. Well, I'll always be in a city. So stranger things have happened, but I suspect it's not going to be New York or Los Angeles. I can't imagine those places, especially during pandemics, are like, what's attractive about them, is their diversity and their melting pot and just ideas coming at you from every direction. But you can't go, at least I don't feel comfortable. I'm not going to the ball game. I'm not going to a crowded museum. I'm not going to, like density of urban population anywhere. Even there's rural place that it's just like 20 different, I don't know what the word is, but like people from here crammed in a small space. Like, I don't need it. I'm not.
All right. You have added a new title to your resume, which is journalist or columnist. There is a very small paper, but an important paper. When I say that, I am not belittling it, because I'm a big fan of small local papers, of which there are not enough, and of which many have been dying off over the last decade, much to my consternation and sadness. You found, did you get to know the editor? Did you submit a piece freelance? And tell us what the name of the paper is and what you do for this paper.
The Cook County News Herald is a paper that I just read here. You pick up the local paper, what's going on around here, right? And I like to do that no matter where I go. It's just pick up a paper and what are they talking about here? I do that for a bunch of different reasons, but it wasn't until I recapped our move here for a Minneapolis St. Paul magazine.
Right.
And it was, I don't know, 2,000 words or so, and glossy and I spent a lot of time on the prose, right? That's very different than screenwriting. But I realized how much I enjoyed it, and I just thought it would be, I don't know, like if I could keep doing that'd be fun. I reached out to the paper and said, hey, looking for anybody, and they had read my Minneapolis St. Paul, that article. And I've written other things for Yahoo Sports, and I'm trying to think of other publications, but I've written, a dozen journalistic pieces, and was able to show them that. And they were, I don't think there's a big long line of people. There's a lot of people that like to complain about the paper, but they don't actually want to write for the paper. I wanted to write for the paper, and they were happy to try me out. And so I joined up and was able to, cut my teeth on a few. I cover the west end of Cook County. It's a county that looks like a rectangle, and it goes north and south, and along the eastern border is Superior. But to locals, we call it east and west, just to keep city people out of the conversation. And so my job is the west end. And so, for a few weeks, I started doing the west end, and I really enjoyed it. Like I just, there's no years and years and years before your movie gets out here. Like you write it on Tuesday and it's in print on Friday. So
and you interviewed a tick, I understand, lately.
Well, then I took.
You decided to have some fun.
I took a liberty, and I asked my editor before I did it. I said, "Well, hey, I have this kind of funny idea," and I didn't pitch him the story, but I said, "Can I write funny stuff?" And Brian is his name, and he's just been incredibly supportive, and everyone there has. And it's like, yeah, try anything, like let's try it. And so, yeah, my first funny piece was on. I just decided to add. You said columnist. Like I just decided to pretend I was a columnist instead of just a cub reporter, which is probably what it says on my paycheck. And so I recognized that they were calling it waterfall season, and I said, "Well, that's a fancy word for mud season." And like it's just mud everywhere, and I understand why we're doing that. And so I just kind of riffed on that and was able to kind of write a comedic short piece on it. Turn that, and that apparently that just got a lot of people like engaged. It was just I don't want to say controversial, but it was just silly slash. There's a lot of love for waterfall. It's not. I'm not making fun of. I'm making fun of whoever branded it that, without naming names, right? So
no one in that neighborhood has seen a column like that in that paper probably ever.
Probably not. Not to my. For the paper's been around for 150 years. It's got a really religious following of people here, and a lot of people outside of here that read this paper, that have connections to the area. And then I don't know how I got this. One of us must have got a tick on us, and I just thought about the life of a tick, and I just thought about because I read Gary Larson's Far Side, and there's a great introduction by Jane Goodall about Gary and how he thinks about the world from animals' points of view,
right?
Or the creatures' points of view, and I just always thought, yeah, that's beautiful, right? And I can't be beautiful, but I can be ridiculous. So I was able to kind of turn that into an interview with a tick, and what do they have to say? And to me, the most interesting part about their day is like I once kicked a soccer ball deep into the woods and went in there and got it out and came out with a tick. And I was like, what's that guy's plan? Like he's just sitting around waiting for me to kick a soccer ball?
Yes.
For months? Like it's like I might never go there for the rest of my life. And so anyway, I just kind of, that was my starting point, and then I kind of create a whole view around it.
I want to call your attention today being, I know many people will be watching this later on YouTube and on Facebook, but we're live August 19th, 2021 at 2:45 p.m. Central. And for your speaking to what you were talking about, they've made a book, they've got a whole atlasobscura.com. Do you know that website?
No.
Yeah, it's very, very popular. They've done a whole book. They find all kinds of odd things around the world. And they got me with a clickbait. What are the smartest insects in the world? So I will send
a quiz. Am I taking a quiz now?
No, I'm not going to ask you that. I want you to read it. I sent it to my two granddaughters in France today because they love insects. They're petrified of spiders, but they love everything else. So I sent it to him. I just thought of it because the dumbest insect is said to be the tick, because it doesn't have to distinguish between anything else to eat. All it wants to do is suck blood all the time. That's it.
That's true.
A bee who has to determine different flowers and how helpful this nectar will be, and they do a dance that tells other bees how far it is to that flower. I mean, fascinating piece. I will send it to you, and if you're listening and want to see it, just go to atlasobscura.com and do a search for the smartest insects in the world.
Well, what's number one? I just top line it for me.
Author admits starting out saying, look, number one, I remember two of the top three: bees and ants.
Ants, right up there. Okay, good.
Yeah, and it's not meant to be a funny piece, but it's amusing, because like as you were doing with ticks, not many of us think about the life of a bee and what a bee or an ant is thinking while it's doing all the stuff we see it do. So anyway, take a look at it.
I will.
Now, I know I had to get you on this week because I know the family is returning to Minneapolis. Your son's re-enrolling in the school he was attending here, and I presume your daughter is as well, eventually at some point. How are you thinking about that?
It's hard. It's and I don't think I would have said this a year ago. I know I wouldn't have, but I'm going to miss a lot of this. I know that for sure. And I'm not 100% sure why we're going back, right? I know why we're going back for school and for dad and for, custody and, I know logistically, but and when you talk about like quality of life and how you kind of discovered a different, richer quality of life, it's going to be hard. It's going to be hard. But I guess one thing I'll say I'm good at, and I hope not start too many sentences like that, but one thing I'm good at is being able to see where you are and kind of make the best of it, right? Because there's not really much you can do about it if you're there. This is your life. So, it's a place that I loved before I left, and I expect I can find a way to fall back in love with it again. I hope I can. And if not, we'll look at the
Will
world
be-
then.
You will be leaving your in-laws, and I happen to know your in-laws, and they're the most pleasant of people, although your titular father-in-law sends all these dumb jokes to me all the time. But you'll be living without your in-laws. I mean, how are you going to handle that?
Well, how are they going to handle it?
Right, exactly.
It's hard for everyone. It was definitely like,
There are 2 grandchildren there. You're a great cook.
well, this is multi-generational living. And when our mutual friend, Dan Buettner, talks about one of the ways to live longer is multi-generational living. And early on when we moved in, I can say it was definitely not a good way to live longer. It was a good way to patricide and mattress, there are all kinds of, it was going to end poorly, but we found a way to kind of coexist happily. And I know it's going to be quieter without us here. I can already hear the champagne cork, like as we're driving away, this is pop, and it's like,
I doubt that.
Today, I'm sure we'll miss them as much as they miss us. Like we definitely love their faces and energy and just presence every day. And like it didn't start out like that. It's not, nobody signed up for this. It was just kind of a pretty ad hoc, and yet you kind of, hey, I'm cooking tonight. It's Mexican night, and you just stop asking questions. You just like tell people, and then it's like, great. Hey, tonight's bean soup. Wait, no vote? Okay, great. Like you just live with it,
Now, I know you've picked up a second paper, so technically you're syndicated now.
I am syndicated now. Readers can enjoy Rob Perez in the Cook County News Herald and the new Rainy Lake Gazette, which is north central Minnesota. And they are syndicating my hilarious columns. Most recently, an interview with an eagle. Mm-hmm. And just a little hint, something I'm working on now, if my editor doesn't kill it, but I did it. I found time and sat down with a Sasquatch.
Well, that's a big story for any paper.
I would think so. Yes.
Are you going to, 2 questions? Are you going to continue writing? And secondly, where can folks read these pieces?
Well, I think until they like take all the pens and all the worlds away, and all the paper, I will continue writing, whether anybody likes it or not. Because Ellie complained, my better half complained, she sees me over there just typing and giggling away. And she's just, it annoys her because no one should enjoy their own work that much. But so yes, I will definitely continue writing, and I hope to continue these fun, the fun part of nature. Like I'm a nature fan. Like I literally started a parody of Thoreau's, Walden Pond. Like I just want there to be more jokes in it, So
where can folks read you?
I'm filling the void. They can see me at the Cook County News Herald, or I hope also the Rainy Lake Gazette.
You don't have a website that you're posting it on your own?
Oh, I should do that. Thank you for the tip.
That's a good, yeah.
I do have a website. I guess they can go to robperez.com, and sometime later I'll post them there. I should do that.
Well, Rob, it's been delightful to see your point of view. I'm still sort of a city boy, as evidenced by those loafers I wore up there.
Were they Ferragamo loafers?
No, they weren't. They weren't anything fancy as I don't.
They were hilarious, though. They were hilarious.
I thought they were hilarious. I was laughing at myself. It looked ridiculous because those. I don't want any. Those paths are not like hard packed dirt paths. They're stones and up and down and water. I mean, it was quite. I don't think I've worn those shoes since. At any rate, Rob, thank you so much for sharing part of your day with us. Great stories. Mr. LA goes to North Country in Minnesota and not only lives, but he prospers and thrives in it. Thank you so much for joining us, Rob.
Thank you for having me.
And I'll say goodbye to Rob and say goodbye to you too as well. If you don't get my every other week newsletter, it comes out every other Tuesday. Just go to Rudy Max's World. No, I'm sorry. Go to Max's World. No, is it Rudy? What's maxaworld.com/newsletter? Maxaworld.com. I don't even know my own website. I've been in France for a month. I can't even remember. Let me look it up here. This is ridiculous that I can't remember my own website. Oh, maxatours.com. Rudy. Maxatours.com /newsletter. And if you scroll down, you'll be able to just put in your first name, second name, no charge, and your email, and I'll send it to you. And I talk about what's happening right then in travel around the world, sometimes favorite restaurants and places, new hotels opening, new airfare rules, new COVID rules, where you can go now, where you can't go now, and some personal observations of mine, not nearly as amusing as Rob's, but just go to maxatours.com /newsletter. And if you just go to maxatours.com, you'll see our tours for 2022. We run some small group, very nice European tours. We'd love to have you take a look at them. All right. And meanwhile, if you have friends who might enjoy this webcast, just go to YouTube and look for Rudy Max's World, and you please subscribe there and click something that for notices, and you'll get a notice every 2 weeks about who I'm having on. Thanks so much for joining us. Take care. Travel safely if you are traveling. I'll tell you a little about my time in southwestern France in Bordeaux next week. But meanwhile, stay safe and see you later.